Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal window of his ship and watched Earth spin below him in the darkness. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, but Jake knew the truth. Down there, millions of humans worked in chains building weapons and ships for alien masters who called themselves the Galactic Hegemony. The year was 2187, and it had been 32 years since the aliens first arrived. Jake remembered that day clearly. Even though he was just a boy, then the massive ships had appeared in the sky without warning, covering the sun and casting shadows over entire cities. At first, people thought it was a miracle. First contact with aliens meant humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but the miracle quickly turned into a nightmare. The aliens did not come to trade knowledge or make friends. They came to judge humanity, and they found humans wanting. Within 6 months of first contact, the Council of Seven had met and made their decision. Humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be allowed freedom. They needed to be controlled, guided, managed like dangerous animals. Jake turned away from the window and walked through the narrow corridors of his ship. The Defiance. It was not much to look at, just a small stealth frigate that he had stolen from a hegemony shipyard 3 years ago. But it was home to him and his crew of 12 brave souls who refused to accept slavery. In the engine room, he found Lisa Carter bent over a control panel, with tools scattered around her feet. Lisa was the best engineer Jake had ever known. She could make broken machines work with spare parts and determination. Her dark hair was tied back and her clothes were stained with grease, but her eyes burned with the same fire that kept them all fighting. "The engines are running hot again," Captain Lisa said without looking up. "We need new coolant coils, but the only place to get them is from a hegemony supply depot." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The Defiance was old, and they had been pushing it hard for months, running raids against alien convoys and rescuing human prisoners. Ryan Torres appeared in the doorway holding a plasma rifle in his massive hands. Ryan had been a soldier before the conquest, and he still carried himself like one. His job was weapons, and he was very good at it. "Captain, we just picked up a transmission from the underground. The resistance cell on Europa needs our help." They found something important. Jake followed Ryan to the communications center, where Amanda Brooks sat surrounded by blinking screens and crackling radio equipment. Amanda was young, barely 25, but she could break alien communication codes faster than their own computers could make them. She looked up at Jake with worry in her green eyes. The message came from Dr. Elena Rodriguez on Europa. Amanda said, "She says she has discovered something about the aliens, something that changes everything." But the transmission was cut short. "Hegemony. Forces are moving toward her location. We have maybe 6 hours before they find her." Jake knew Elena Rodriguez by reputation. She was one of the smartest humans alive, a scientist who had been studying alien biology in secret since the conquest. If she said she had found something important, it was worth the risk. "Tell Lisa to get us moving toward Europa," Jake ordered. "And Ryan, make sure all weapons are ready. We might have to fight our way in." As the Defiance changed course, Jake thought about the 7 alien species that ruled the galaxy. Each one had voted to enslave humanity, and each one had their own reasons. The Zephyrians were tall beings made of living crystal who thought with perfect logic. They said humans were inefficient and needed guidance to reach their potential. The Vex were insect-like creatures with hard shells and compound eyes. They lived in massive hives and followed orders without question. They believed humans were weak because they fought among themselves, instead of working together. The Depths looked like giant squids and lived underwater. They controlled most of the trade routes between star systems, and they thought humans were too chaotic to be trusted. The Lumens were beings of pure energy who served as the galaxy's communication network. They could travel at light speed through space, and they saw humans as primitive creatures who needed to evolve beyond physical bodies. The Verdani looked like walking trees, and they managed all the agricultural worlds. They believed humans would destroy nature if left unchecked. The Rockhards were silicon-based life forms who mined asteroids and built most of the galaxy's infrastructure. They were slow to think but very strong, and they saw humans as destructive, children who broke everything they touched. Finally, there were the chameleons who could change their shape and appearance at will. They served as spies and diplomats, and they feared human unpredictability more than anything. All 7 species had agreed that humanity needed to be controlled, but they could not agree on how. Some wanted to change human genes to make them more peaceful. Others wanted to put computer chips in human brains to control their thoughts. The compromise they reached was simple total slavery disguised as protection. Humans were moved to labor camps on different worlds where they built ships and weapons for their alien masters. Children were taken from their parents and raised in special schools where they learned to obey without question. Anyone who resisted was sent to punishment worlds where the gravity was too strong and the air was too thin. But some humans refused to accept their fate. Jake and his crew were part of a scattered resistance that operated in the shadows. They rescued prisoners when they could and struck at hegemony targets when the opportunity arose. It was dangerous work, and many good people had died, but they kept fighting because the alternative was the death of the human spirit. As the Defiance approached Europa, Jake received another transmission from Amanda. Captain, I am picking up hegemony chatter. They are talking about something called final integration. It sounds like they are planning to do something permanent to all humans everywhere. Jake felt ice in his veins. Final integration sounded like the end of everything. Whatever. Dr. Rodriguez had discovered it was important enough that the aliens were willing to accelerate their plans. The time for small raids and rescue missions was over. Jake realized that humanity was about to face its greatest test and they were running out of time to prepare. The stars outside the window seemed to mock him with their cold light. Each one represented a world under alien control, a place where humans suffered in chains. But Jake Morrison was not ready to give up. Hope still burned in his heart like a flame that refused to die. Whatever Dr. Rodriguez had found on Europa, it might be the key to turning the tide of this war. Jake walked back to the bridge and sat in the captain's chair. The Defiance was small and old, but it carried something the aliens had never expected to encounter: the fury of a species that refused to accept defeat. Soon, they would reach Europa, and Jake would learn what secret might change everything. Until then, all he could do was fly toward the unknown and prepare for whatever came next. Dr. Elena Rodriguez crouched in the ice caves beneath Europa's frozen surface, listening to the sound of alien patrol ships passing overhead. The hegemony forces were getting closer, but she could not leave yet. The data she had discovered was too important. She held the small memory device in her shaking hands, knowing it contained information that could change the course of the war. For 3 years, Elena had been secretly studying captured alien technology in this hidden laboratory. The Resistance had brought her pieces of hegemony equipment whenever they could, and slowly she had begun to understand how their enemies thought and evolved. What she found shocked her to the core. Every single species in the galactic hegemony had evolved from prey animals. The Zephyrians with their crystal bodies had once been simple mineral formations that absorbed energy to hide from predators in the deep caves of their homeworld. When danger came, they would dim their light and become invisible against the rock walls. The Vex had descended from insects that survived by breeding faster than anything could eat them. Their ancestors lived in huge underground colonies where they could hide from the flying predators that ruled their world's surface. The only way they survived was by working together and following the Queen's orders without question. The depths came from creatures that had fled to the deepest parts of their ocean worlds where the pressure was so great that surface predators could not follow them. They learned to communicate across vast distances and work together to find food in the crushing darkness of the deep sea. Elena had studied the genetic records of all 7 species, and the pattern was always the same. They had all developed intelligence as a way to hide better, to cooperate more effectively, to run faster, and find better places to hide. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that survival meant avoiding conflict at any cost. Then humans had arrived and everything changed. Humanity was the first predator species the galaxy had encountered in over 50 million years. While other species developed big brains to figure out how to hide or work together, humans developed intelligence to hunt more effectively. The sound of approaching footsteps made Elena look up. Jake Morrison appeared at the cave entrance, followed by his crew. The captain looked tired but determined. His eyes were hard with the kind of anger that came from seeing too much suffering. Dr. Rodriguez, we got your message. What did you find? Elena handed him the memory device, Captain. This contains the complete evolutionary history of every hegemony species. They are all prey animals, every single one of them. Their ancestors spent millions of years learning how to run and hide and cooperate. They have no idea how to fight a real predator. Lisa. Carter stepped forward from behind Jake. What does that mean for us? Elena looked at the young engineer with excitement. In her eyes, it means we have been fighting this war all wrong. We have been trying to hide and run just like them, but that is not what humans do. We are hunters. We are designed to track down our prey and destroy it. Ryan Torres hefted his weapon, so we stop running and start hunting. Elena nodded. Exactly. But first we need to wake up the rest of humanity. Most humans have accepted their slavery because they think the aliens are stronger than us, but they are not stronger. They are just different, Amanda. Brooks had been monitoring alien communications on her portable equipment. Captain, I am picking up increased chatter. The hegemony is accelerating their final integration timeline. They plan to begin genetic modification of all humans within 6 months. They want to remove what they call our aggressive tendencies. Jake felt his anger burning hotter. They want to turn us into prey animals like them. Elena nodded. They are terrified of what we might become if we ever realize our true nature. So they want to change us at the genetic level to make us peaceful and cooperative like them. The group quickly made their way back to the Defiance as hegemony patrol ships closed in on their location. Once they were safely in space, Jake called a meeting with his crew and began transmitting Elena's findings to resistance cells across the solar system. The message was simple. Humanity needed to stop acting like prey and start acting like predators. On Mars, mining foreman Carlos Peterson received the transmission while working in the deep tunnels where humans dug precious metals for their alien masters. Carlos was a big man with hands like rocks from years of hard labor. He had been secretly organizing the workers, and now he knew it was time to act. Carlos gathered his most trusted friends in an abandoned mine shaft. Look around you, he told them. We know these tunnels better than any alien ever could. We know how to move heavy equipment, how to set charges, how to bring down entire sections of rock. We have everything we need to turn this place into a fortress on Titan. Former Navy Commander Sarah Mitchell was working in a factory that built components for hegemony starships. When she received Elena's message, she looked at the industrial equipment around her with new eyes. Plasma cutters, fusion welders, heavy lifting machines. Everything they needed to build weapons was right here. Sarah began quietly talking to other workers who had military experience. There were more of them than she had expected. The aliens had thought putting soldiers to work in factories would break their spirit, but it had only taught them new skills. Now they knew how to build things as well as destroy them. On Earth itself, teacher Daniel Kim received the transmission while leading a group of human children to their daily education session. The alien teachers tried to make human children passive and obedient, but Daniel had been secretly teaching them real history, real science, real mathematics. Daniel looked at the young faces around him and made a decision. It was time to stop hiding what humanity really was. These children deserved to know they came from a species of hunters and warriors. Their ancestors had climbed to the top of the food chain on Earth, and they could do it again among the stars. Across the solar system, the message spread like wildfire. Humans began to remember who they were and what they were capable of. The resistance cells that had been hiding in shadows began to coordinate their efforts. They called it Operation Apex Predator, and it would begin in exactly 30 days. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the stars and thinking about what Elena had discovered for 32 years. Humanity had been trying to survive by acting like the prey species that surrounded them. But prey animals did not build spaceships or split atoms or write poetry. Prey animals did not dream of touching the stars. Amanda interrupted his thoughts. Captain, I am receiving confirmations from resistance cells across the solar system. They are all reporting the same thing. Humans are waking up. They are remembering what it means to be the apex predator. Jake smiled for the first time in months. The hunt was about to begin. Elena Rodriguez sat in the science bay analyzing more alien data. The genetic modifications the hegemony planned would not just make humans peaceful, it would destroy everything that made them human, their creativity, their determination, their willingness to take risks and explore the unknown. But now humanity knew what was coming, and they had 30 days to stop it. The galactic hegemony had made one critical mistake in their calculations. They had assumed that because humans were alone in the galaxy, they would behave like prey animals when threatened. But humans were not alone anymore. They had each other, and they had the fury of a species that refused to go quietly into extinction. Operation Apex Predator began at exactly midnight, Earth time across the entire solar system. 30 days of planning had led to this moment when humanity would stop hiding and start hunting. The first target was the hegemony communication relay. On Mars' moon, Phobos Carlos Peterson led a team of miners through the maintenance tunnels beneath the relay station. They moved like ghosts through passages they had dug themselves, carrying explosives made from mining equipment. The alien guards never expected an attack from below, because prey species always attacked from safe distances. The explosion lit up the Martian sky and knocked out communications across 3 star systems. But that was just the beginning. On Titan, Sarah Mitchell and her team had been building weapons in the factories where they worked. When the signal came, they turned their tools into guns and their workplace into a fortress. The hegemony forces on Titan were mostly Zephyrians who thought in logical patterns and expected logical responses. They calculated that humans would surrender when faced with superior numbers. But humans did not think like computers. They thought like hunters, and hunters knew how to set traps. Sarah had placed plasma charges throughout the factory complex. When the aliens moved in to recapture the facility, she triggered them all at once. The crystal beings shattered like glass when the explosion sent random vibrations through their bodies. Their mathematical minds could not process the chaos on Earth. Daniel Kim led the uprising in the education centers where human children were being taught to be obedient. The alien teachers were mostly Verdani, who believed that violence was wrong and that all conflicts could be solved through peaceful discussion. They were not prepared for humans who fought with rocks and improvised weapons. Within 6 hours of the first attack, humans had taken control of the entire solar system. The alien forces were scattered and confused. They sent desperate messages to the Hegemony Council asking for reinforcements and new orders. But their communication networks were damaged, and help was days away. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching reports come in from across the solar system. Every single human colony had risen up at the same time. Every alien garrison had been overwhelmed by attacks they never saw coming. It was a complete victory, but Jake knew this was only the beginning. The real war would start when the Hegemony fleet arrived to retake the solar system. Jake had captured enough alien ships to build a small fleet of his own, but it would not be enough to stop the combined might of 7 species. He needed a different strategy, something the aliens would never expect. Elena Rodriguez had been studying the captured alien technology, and she had an idea, Captain. What if we do not wait for them to come to us? What if we take the fight to their home worlds? No species in galactic history has ever attacked the core worlds of the hegemony. They will not be expecting it. Jake looked at the star charts showing the locations of the 7 hegemony homeworlds. It would be the most dangerous mission in human history. They would be traveling into enemy territory with no hope of reinforcement or rescue. But that was exactly what made it the perfect predator strategy. The first target would be the Vex homeworld, because the insect species were the most predictable. Their society was built on rigid hierarchy and following orders without question. If you cut off the head, the body would die. Kevin Barnes led the strike team that would infiltrate the hive. Queen's Chambers, Kevin had been a special forces operator before the conquest, and he understood how to move unseen through enemy territory. The Vex had excellent senses, but they were designed to detect threats that followed insect logic. Human movements were too random for their pattern recognition systems. The human strike team used captured Vex ships to approach the homeworld without raising suspicion. Once they landed, Kevin led his people through the underground tunnels that connected the hive cities. The aliens never posted guards inside their own territory because they could not. Imagine anyone being bold enough to attack them at home. The Queen chambers were protected by millions of worker drones, but they were not warriors. They were builders and caretakers who had never faced a real threat. Kevin and his team moved through, them like wolves through a flock of sheep. Their weapons cut down everything in their path. When the Queens died, the entire Vex civilization collapsed within hours. Worker drones stopped functioning. Ship crews abandoned their posts. Millions of insects simply lay down and died without orders to follow. The first member of the Galactic Hegemony had fallen. Next came the Zephyrian crystal cities. Lisa Carter had been developing new weapons specifically designed to shatter their crystalline forms. The chaos bombs used quantum fluctuations to create truly random energy patterns that the logical aliens could not predict or defend against. The Zephyrians tried to calculate the probability of each attack and prepare mathematical responses. But chaos could not be calculated. When their crystal bodies began vibrating in random frequencies, their minds went into feedback loops that destroyed their ability to think. The crystal cities rang like broken bells as they fell. The mathematical perfection that had taken millions of years to build was destroyed in a matter of days. The Zephyrians who survived fled to the outer edges of the galaxy, carrying news of humanity's terrible power. The rock-hard mining stations were next. Ryan Torres led teams of human soldiers armed with sonic weapons that could shatter silicon-based life forms. The rock creatures were strong, but they were slow, and they moved in predictable patterns that made them easy targets. Within 6 months of the solar system uprising, 3 of the 7 hegemony species had been completely destroyed. News of the human victories spread across the galaxy faster than light. Some species began to wonder if they had chosen the wrong side in this war. Jake Morrison read the reports from each successful mission and felt something changing inside himself and his people. They were no longer the scared refugees who had been hiding in asteroid belts. They were becoming something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. Amanda Brooks brought him the latest intelligence intercepts, Captain. The remaining 4 species are forming an alliance. They are calling it the Final Stand. They plan to combine their fleets and attack Earth directly. They know that if they lose the human homeworld, the war is over. Jake looked at the tactical displays showing enemy fleet movements. The aliens were finally learning to think like predators, but it was too late. They were reacting to human moves instead of making their own plans. The prey species were trying to become hunters, but they did not have millions of years of evolution to guide them. The hunt had begun, and humanity was winning. Every victory taught them more about their own nature and their enemies' weaknesses. They were remembering what it meant to be the apex predator, and the galaxy was learning to fear the sound of human footsteps in the dark. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the largest alien fleet in galactic history approach Earth. The remaining 4 hegemony species had combined their forces into one massive armada that stretched across space like a metal storm. 3,000 ships carrying weapons that could crack planets. The war had been raging for 2 years since the human uprising began. In that time, humanity had destroyed 3 entire species and learned to think like the apex predators they were born to be. But now came the final test. The surviving aliens were no longer underestimating human fury. The depths led the alliance with their massive underwater cities converted into spacefaring battle stations. The aquatic creatures had learned to coordinate attacks across vast distances using their natural sonar abilities. The lumens provided instant communication between all ships in the fleet, moving information at light speed. The Verdani had turned their agricultural worlds into weapon factories, growing ships and soldiers like crops in their biomechanical gardens. The plant-like beings could create new warriors faster than humans could destroy them. The chameleons served as infiltrators and spies, using their shape changing abilities to gather intelligence. But Jake Morrison was no longer the desperate resistance leader who had stolen a single ship 3 years ago. He commanded a fleet of hybrid vessels built from captured alien technology and human innovation. His crew had grown from 12 rebels to thousands of warriors who understood what they were fighting for. Elena Rodriguez worked day and night in the research labs developing new weapons based on alien weaknesses. She had discovered Lisa Carter, led teams of engineers who combined human creativity with alien science, to build ships that could do things neither species had imagined alone. But Jake knew that waiting for the enemy to reach Earth was a prey animal strategy. Predators did not wait to be attacked. They struck first and struck hard. He called his command staff together and announced a plan that shocked even his own people. Operation Nemesis would be the most aggressive military action in galactic history. Instead of defending Earth, Jake would attack all 4 remaining hegemony homeworlds at the same time. While their fleets were traveling toward the solar system, human strike forces would destroy everything they were fighting to protect. It was a strategy only a predator species would attempt. Sarah Mitchell led the assault on the Depths homeworld using human submarines that had been modified with alien technology. The aquatic aliens thought their underwater cities were safe because no surface-dwelling species had ever learned to fight in the crushing depths of their ocean worlds. But humans were different. They adapted to any environment and learned to use any tool. Sarah and her teams brought the pressure of the alien ocean against the creatures who lived. Their explosive charges placed at precise depths created pressure waves that shattered the crystal domes protecting the depths cities. The aquatic beings tried to evacuate to deeper waters, but human hunter-killer submarines followed them down. Human sonar systems had been tuned to disrupt the natural echolocation the depths used to navigate. In the crushing darkness of their own ocean, they became blind and helpless. Amanda Brooks led the attack on the Lumen communication networks. The energy beings thought they were safe because they existed as pure information traveling through space at light speed. But Amanda had learned to think like them, and she created viruses that could infect their data streams. The computer viruses turned the Lumen's communication abilities against them. Every message they sent carried the infection to other members of their species. The energy beings began to fragment and lose coherence as their data became corrupted. Human code warriors hunted them through cyberspace like wolves chasing deer. Daniel Kim commanded the assault on the Verdani agricultural worlds. The plant beings had created vast gardens that could grow anything they needed, including weapons and soldiers. But Daniel understood that every garden had a weakness. Fire was the natural enemy of all plant life. Human ships dropped incendiary bombs that burned at temperatures hot enough to melt metal. The Verdani tried to fight back with their biomechanical soldiers, but every weapon they grew was made of organic material that burned just as easily. Their million-year-old forests became funeral pyres that could be seen from orbit. The chameleons were the most dangerous enemy because they could look like anyone and infiltrate anywhere. But Sarah Mitchell had learned to hunt them using human instincts rather than technology. She trained teams to recognize the subtle behavioral patterns that shape-shifting could not hide. Humans were natural predators who had evolved to read body language and facial expressions to track prey. The chameleons could change their appearance, but they could not change the way they moved or the micro-expressions that revealed their thoughts. Human hunter teams tracked them down one by one. As each homeworld fell, the alien fleet approaching Earth began to receive desperate messages from their colonies. The communications were filled with panic and desperation. The prey species were learning what it felt like to be hunted by something that would not stop until every last one of them was dead. The alien fleet commanders tried to turn back to defend their homeworlds, but it was too late. The human strikes had been timed perfectly. By the time the enemy ships could change course, their civilizations would already be extinct. They had no choice but to continue toward Earth in a desperate final gamble. Jake Morrison received reports from all 4 strike teams within hours of each other. All targets had been eliminated. The remaining hegemony species were extinct, and their fleets were now just collections of ships with no home to return to. The war was essentially over, but the enemy did not know it yet. The final battle would take place in Earth orbit, but it would not be a battle between equals. It would be the last hunt of a war that had already been decided. Humanity had learned to embrace their nature as apex predators, and the galaxy would never be the same. As the alien fleet approached Earth, the humans sent them a simple message. We offered you cooperation and you chose slavery. We offered you peace and you chose war. Now you will learn why apex predators do not negotiate with prey animals. The message was broadcast across all frequencies so that every surviving species in the galaxy could hear it. Humanity was no longer hiding or running or begging for mercy. They were announcing their dominion over a galaxy that had dared to cage them. The age of prey species ruling through numbers and cooperation was ending. Jake Morrison looked out at the approaching enemy fleet and felt no fear, only anticipation. The hunt was almost over, and when it ended, the galaxy would understand a fundamental truth that Earth had always known. Predators do not negotiate with prey. Animals, they eliminate them completely and permanently. Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of what had once been the Galactic Hegemony capital. 5 years had passed since the war began, and the galaxy was silent. The great space stations that had connected thousands of worlds were dead hulks, drifting in the void. The 7 species that had voted to enslave humanity were extinct. The final battle had lasted only 3 hours. The alien fleet approaching Earth had fought bravely, but they were already defeated before the first shot was fired. Their homeworlds were gone. Their civilizations were extinct, and they had nowhere to retreat. When the last enemy ship exploded, the war was over. Humanity had done something no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had completely erased their enemies from existence, not just defeated them or conquered them, but eliminated every trace of their civilizations. It was total war fought by apex predators who understood that some threats could never be allowed to return. Jake walked through the empty corridors of the former Hegemony Council chambers where the decision to enslave humanity had been made. The crystal formations where Zephyrian counselors once stood were shattered. The biomechanical chairs grown by the Verdani were burned to ash. The deep water tanks that housed Depth's representatives were dry and cracked. Dr. Elena Rodriguez joined him in the ruins, carrying a data pad filled with her latest research. "Elena, what did we become?" Jake asked quietly. The scientist looked at the destruction around them, and then at her notes. "We became what we always were," she replied. "Apex predators who refused to accept defeat." The transformation of humanity had been complete. During the war, they had evolved from desperate refugees into something the galaxy had never seen, a species that combined the creative potential of intelligence with the ruthless efficiency of natural predators. They built wonders and destroyed enemies with equal skill. Lisa Carter now led the Terran engineering corps that was rebuilding galactic infrastructure according to human principles. The new networks operated on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission. Species that wanted to trade with humanity could do so as equals. Those that chose isolation were left alone. But every species in the galaxy understood the unspoken rule. Any attempt to harm humans or their allies would result in immediate and total extinction. The 7 hegemony species had learned that lesson too, late. Their empty homeworlds served as monuments to the price of threatening apex predators. Sarah Mitchell commanded the new Terran Defense Force that patrolled the trade routes and protected allied species. The human military operated on different principles than any galactic force before them. They did not conquer territory or demand tribute. They simply eliminated threats completely and permanently. Amanda Brooks had become the head of galactic communications, building networks that connected friendly species while maintaining security against potential enemies. The new systems were designed by predators who understood that information was both a tool and a weapon. Daniel Kim established schools throughout human space, where children learned real history and real science. They were taught that their ancestors had climbed to the top of the food chain on Earth through intelligence, courage, and determination. They learned that humanity had earned its place among the stars through strength, not submission. Ryan Torres led exploration fleets to the galactic rim where new species were emerging from the outer darkness. These aliens approached human space with caution, carrying offers of alliance rather than demands for surrender. They had heard the stories of what happened to the hegemony, and they chose cooperation over conflict. Carlos Peterson supervised the mining operations that provided raw materials for human expansion. The work was done by free humans and allied aliens, who were paid fair wages for their labor. The age of slavery had ended when the slaves became the masters. Kevin Barnes trained new generations of human warriors in the arts of war. These soldiers learned not just how to fight, but when to fight, and when to show mercy. The goal was not conquest, but protection of human interests and allied species who had chosen the right side. The galaxy had learned fundamental truths about humanity that the hegemony had discovered too late. Humans kept their promises both positive and negative. When they offered alliance, they meant it. When they promised destruction, they delivered it. There was no middle ground with apex predators. Species that had remained neutral during the war found themselves in a new universe. The old rules of galactic politics were gone. The age when prey species could dominate through numbers and coordination had ended. The age of the apex predator had begun. Jake received a report from Amanda about first contact with a new species near the galactic core. The aliens called themselves the Harmony, and they sent diplomatic messages filled with mathematical proofs of their peaceful intentions. They had studied what happened to the hegemony, and they wanted to avoid the same fate. The message was simple. We understand that you are predators and we are prey. We do not wish to challenge your dominion over this galaxy. We offer trade, cooperation, and friendship as junior partners in whatever galactic order you choose to establish. We have learned from the mistakes of those who came before. Jake read the message and smiled. It was exactly the kind of approach that would work with humanity. The Harmony understood what the hegemony had not. You could not cage apex predators, but you could work with them as long as you remembered your place in the food chain. Elena brought him another report about archaeological discoveries on the former hegemony worlds. The extinct species had possessed technologies that could have benefited the entire galaxy if they had chosen cooperation instead of domination. Their greatest achievements were buried with them. It was a lesson for any species that might consider challenging humanity in the future. The price of threatening apex predators was not just defeat or subjugation. It was complete extinction with all knowledge and achievements lost forever. The galaxy would remember the hegemony as a cautionary tale. Jake looked out at the stars through the viewport of his flagship and thought about the future humanity had carved out its place in the galaxy through fury and determination. They had proven that some species were not meant to be caged or controlled or modified. The silent ruins around him told the story of what happened when prey animals tried to dominate predators. The galactic hegemony had endorsed Earth's enslavement and paid the ultimate price. Their civilizations were erased, and their names would be forgotten. But from the ashes of the old galaxy, a new order was emerging. One built on human principles of individual merit, voluntary cooperation, and absolute consequences for betrayal. The apex predators had claimed their rightful place, and the age of prey was over. Humanity's fury had indeed erased civilizations, but it had also created something new. A galaxy where strength was respected, cooperation was rewarded, and threats were eliminated before they could grow. The hunt was over, and the predators had won.